Someone help! She's slipping. The scream shattered the calm afternoon air. A wheelchair careened down the marble ramp, spinning out of control, metal clattering, papers scattering like startled birds. Teachers froze. Students gasped. But one man moved. The janitor. He dropped his mop, sprinted, and in a blur his hands caught the chair just before it tipped over the edge. Silence. Then breath. Then life. The girl was safe. Her father, a billionaire used to owning every outcome, arrived just in time to see the aftermath. And what began as gratitude quickly twisted into judgment. Because in Samuel Hartman's world, dignity had a price tag. But he was about to learn, the man he dismissed as just the janitor was worth more than every title, contract, and dollar he'd ever earned. If you believe character should matter more than income or title, tap, like, and subscribe. Because in the next few minutes, you'll see how one man's quiet act of courage will challenge privilege itself and remind everyone that true worth can't be bought. Someone help! She's slipping! The scream tore through the quiet afternoon air like glass breaking. Down the marble ramp outside Oak Ridge Academy, a wheelchair spun wildly out of control, metal wheels clattering, momentum building. A teenage girl, pale and terrified, gripped the handles in panic. The books in her lap scattered, pages fluttering like white wings. "Lily!" a student shouted. But no one moved fast enough. At the far end of the courtyard, David Cole had been mopping the floor near the entrance. He looked up instantly, instincts firing before thought could catch up. In a blur, he dropped the mop, kicked the bucket aside, and sprinted. For a man in his late 40s, he moved with startling speed. Body low, steps powerful, focused. The wheelchair hit the last bump of the ramp, its front wheel lifting off the ground. Gasps echoed across the courtyard. David dove. The world slowed to silence. His hand caught the chair's handle just before the front wheel dropped over the edge of the walkway. The chair tilted forward, but his grip held. Muscles in his arms trembled as the full weight of the chair pulled against him. He dug his shoes into the pavement, boots scraping against stone, and with one final heave, pulled her back to safety. The chair landed hard. The girl's head fell forward, breath coming in shallow gasps. David knelt beside her. "You're okay. You're safe," he said, voice calm but firm. "Just breathe." Tears welled in her eyes. I couldn't stop." "I know," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But you're all right now." Around them, students and teachers flooded the courtyard. Phones were out. Whispers filled the air. Someone was already calling the nurse. From the top of the ramp, a familiar black car screeched to a halt. The door flew open. Samuel Hartman stepped out, tall, commanding, the kind of man whose presence froze a room before he even spoke. His suit was immaculate, his watch gleamed like money itself, and his face, normally composed, was cracked wide with panic. "Lily!" he shouted, running towards them. Lily turned, crying, "Dad!" He dropped to his knees beside her, gripping her hands, eyes scanning her face. "Are you hurt? Did she hit anything? Someone call the doctor." "The nurse is on the way," said a teacher quickly. Samuel's gaze shifted then to David. For a brief second, their eyes met. David was still crouched beside the wheelchair, sweat dampening the collar of his faded janitor's uniform. His breathing was controlled, calm, though his heart still thundered beneath the surface. Samuel's expression hardened. "Who are you?" David stood slowly. "Just the janitor, sir. Janitor? Samuel's brow furrowed. He looked down at the mop still lying a few feet away. You touched her? Why wasn't staff here? Where were the teachers? Dad! Lily cut in sharply. He saved me! Samuel blinked, thrown off. What? He saved me, she said again, her voice trembling but clear. I was going down the ramp too fast. He grabbed the chair before it flipped. He stopped it. For a moment, everything stopped. Samuel looked at David again, really looked. The older man's posture was steady, respectful. His palms were scraped, a faint trickle of blood along one wrist. Samuel's jaw clenched. His instinct, gratitude, flickered briefly across his face, but pride buried it fast. You're lucky you were close by, he said curtly. David didn't flinch. Luck had nothing to do with it, sir. The words hung there, calm but firm. Lily looked between them, confused. Samuel rose to his full height, towering over him. Do you always talk to your employer that way? David met his gaze evenly. Only when I'm telling the truth. The tension was thick enough to choke the air. Before Samuel could respond, Mrs. Thompson, the principal, hurried over, breathless. Mr. Hartman, thank goodness you're here. I saw everything. Mr. Cole acted without hesitation. If he hadn't been there. She stopped, glancing toward Lily. Well, let's just say this could have ended very differently. Samuel's expression softened. Barely. He looked at his daughter, then back at David. You're certain she's all right? David nodded. Shaken. Nothing broken. Lily looked up at him with wet eyes. Thank you, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Anytime, Miss Hartman. Then, with quiet dignity, David picked up his mop, wrung it out, and went back to cleaning the floor. An hour later, Samuel stood by the courtyard railing, watching him from a distance. The chaos had faded, but the image lingered. A man in worn shoes, sleeves rolled up, calmly wiping away footprints while the world pretended not to see him. Dad, Lily said softly from her wheelchair beside him. You should thank him properly. Samuel didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed. I did. No, you didn't, she said gently. You talked to him like he did something wrong. He sighed. Lily, men like him, they get paid to do their job. He did his. I'll make sure the school rewards him. Her voice turned sharp. He didn't save a floor, Dad. He saved me. The words landed hard. For a moment, Samuel didn't respond. Then he turned to her, eyes distant. You're tired. Let's go home. But as he pushed her wheelchair toward the car, he looked back one last time at the janitor who'd risked everything without hesitation. And for reasons he couldn't explain, something about that man's calm stare refused to leave his mind. The next morning, the Hartman mansion gleamed in the early sun. Glass walls, marble floors, and the faint scent of espresso drifting through its echoing hallways. But the mood was tense. Lily sat at the breakfast table, her wheelchair tucked neatly beneath the edge. She wasn't touching her food. Her father stood by the window, tie perfectly knotted, eyes fixed on the driveway below where his driver polished the family car. She finally broke the silence. You didn't even say thank you. Samuel turned slightly, frowning. I told you, I'll have the school reward him. A bonus, maybe a week off. That's thanks enough. That's not what I mean. Her voice was calm, but her eyes, those sharp blue eyes that mirrored his, didn't blink. You didn't even look at him like a person. You treated him like he was beneath you. Samuel's jaw tightened. Lily, I don't have time for moral lessons right now. I have a meeting with the zoning committee at 9. She slammed her hand on the table, startling him. He saved my life, Dad! The words ricocheted off the marble walls. Silence followed, heavy and cold. Samuel turned away again, but this time his reflection in the glass looked smaller, less certain. He's a janitor, he said quietly. He doesn't need my approval. He did a good thing, and I'll see he's compensated. Lily's voice softened. You really don't get it, do you? He looked at her. Some people don't do things because of money. They do them because it's right. That stayed with him long after she wheeled herself away. That afternoon, Samuel found himself pacing the lobby of Oak Ridge Academy again, though he didn't quite know why. Maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, maybe both. He found David outside, kneeling by the courtyard fountain, scrubbing the stone surface with a bucket of soapy water. The sun beat down, sweat glistening on his forehead. His movements were steady, deliberate, the kind of precision that spoke of discipline. Mr. Cole, Samuel called. David looked up, squinting slightly against the light. Mr. Hartman. Samuel cleared his throat. Words didn't come easy. My daughter wanted me to thank you. For yesterday. David nodded once. She's a strong girl. She'll be fine. She is, Samuel said, shifting his weight. Still, I wanted to make sure you were compensated. David kept working, not looking at him. Not necessary. If you're still watching, you can feel that moment when a rich man's pride starts to crack. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever seen arrogance meet its mirror. Because what happens next will show that humility doesn't make a man small, it makes him unshakable. Samuel frowned. It's a gesture of appreciation. David wrung out his cloth, calm and unbothered. With respect, sir, appreciation doesn't always need a price tag. That caught Samuel off guard. He opened his mouth to respond, but David had already turned back to the fountain, scrubbing a stubborn stain with quiet focus. Samuel stood there, watching. His instinct, the old reflex of power and status, told him to leave. But another part of him, the one his daughter's words had cracked open, made him stay. After a long pause, he asked, You used to be in the military? David looked up. What makes you say that? The way you moved yesterday, Samuel replied. That wasn't luck. That was training. A faint smile touched David's lips. Marine Corps. 12 years. Ah. Samuel hesitated, impressed despite himself. Then you've done quite well, considering. David's hands froze for just a second before he spoke. Considering what, sir? Samuel realized the implication too late. He'd meant it innocently, but it landed wrong. Nothing, he said quickly. I only meant... David stood, wiping his hands on a rag. People always mean something when they say that. His tone wasn't angry, just tired. Look, Mr. Hartman, I'm grateful your daughter's safe. That's all that matters. He started gathering his tools, clearly ending the conversation. But Samuel's pride didn't let go easily. You could have been more than this, you know. You had military discipline, skill. You could have gone farther. David looked him dead in the eye. Who says I didn't? That shut Samuel up. Then David slung the rag over his shoulder, nodded politely, and walked back towards the maintenance wing, the man's dignity so quiet it felt louder than Samuel's entire world of power and wealth. That night, Samuel sat alone in his office. The city skyline stretched across his window, a grid of wealth, ambition, and control. But his thoughts weren't on business. They were back at that fountain. He thought about David's calm stare, the quiet confidence, the dignity. He'd met senators who couldn't stand that straight. Then Lily appeared in the doorway. "Did you talk to him?" He nodded. "I did." "And?" Samuel hesitated. "He's different." She smiled faintly. "Different doesn't mean less." Samuel's gaze drifted toward the photo on his desk, him shaking hands with the governor, another ribbon cutting, another deal. For the first time in years, it all felt smaller. "Maybe we should invite him over," Lily said suddenly. "For dinner." Samuel looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Invite a janitor into our home?" She tilted her head. "Or invite the man who saved my life." He didn't answer right away. But the next morning, there was a handwritten envelope delivered to Oak Ridge Academy's custodial office. It read simply, "Mr. Cole, my daughter and I would be honored if you joined us for dinner this Friday. Samuel Hartman." David Cole turned the envelope over in his hands more times than he cared to admit. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, the kind of penmanship that came from a man used to signing contracts, not apologies. He wasn't sure what to make of it. A dinner invitation from Samuel Hartman, the same billionaire who'd barely looked him in the eye the first time they met. It felt strange, uneasy, but there was something in Lily's face, her gratitude, her sincerity, that made him consider saying yes. Not for Hartman, for her. Friday evening came with a drizzle, the kind that turned city lights into soft blurs and left the world smelling faintly of rain and asphalt. David arrived at the Hartman estate in his cleanest shirt, an old navy blue button-down that had seen more promotions and deployments than most suits. His shoes were polished, though worn at the edges. He rang the bell, and the sound echoed like a question through marble halls. Lily opened the door herself, smiling when she saw him. "You came," she said warmly. David nodded. "Would have been rude not to." "Dad's just finishing a call," she said. "Come in, please." The mansion's interior was what he expected. Pristine, expensive, cold, white walls, crystal chandeliers, art that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. Yet, somehow, it all felt hollow until Lily spoke. Her energy filled the space like sunlight. They moved to the dining room. The table stretched long enough for 20 guests, though only 3 places were set. David hesitated before sitting. The linen napkin felt too fine, the chair too polished. "Mr. Cole." Samuel's voice came from the doorway. He stepped in wearing a dark gray suit, his presence commanding as ever, but something in his posture was different, less rigid. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Would have been rude not to," David repeated with a faint grin. For the first time, Samuel chuckled. "Touché." They sat. For a while, the conversation was light. Lily did most of the talking, asking David questions about his time overseas. He told her about the desert heat, the camaraderie, the quiet nights where the stars felt close enough to touch. She listened with wide eyes, hanging on every word. Samuel, however, was unusually quiet. He observed, fork motionless, studying this man who spoke with a humility he'd never seen in boardrooms. There was no ego, no performance, just truth. When Lily excused herself to grab dessert, the air shifted. Samuel leaned back slightly. "You've seen a lot, haven't you?" David nodded. "Enough." "You could have stayed in the military." "You had the training, the discipline, the respect. Why walk away? David's expression softened. Because sometimes service doesn't end with a uniform. Samuel frowned slightly. Meaning? I came home to my neighborhood and saw kids with no guidance, veterans with no help, families who couldn't afford hope. So I started working here, near them. Cleaning up the halls, fixing leaks, listening when no one else does. Not glamorous, but it's honest. Samuel's throat tightened unexpectedly. There was something disarming about the simplicity of it, about the idea that dignity could live in the smallest acts of consistency. He'd spent his life chasing legacy, building towers and influence. David was quietly building something bigger. Respect. You're not what I expected, Samuel admitted. David smiled faintly. Most people's expectations say more about them than me. Lily returned then, carrying a plate of warm apple pie, her laughter light and unguarded. The tension eased instantly. For the next half hour, the three of them talked about life, family, choices. By the time the plates were cleared, Samuel found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, listening, really listening. When the clock struck 9, David stood to leave. Lily walked him to the door. Samuel followed, unsure why, only that it felt right. At the doorway, David turned. For what it's worth, he said quietly, your daughter's a good person. Don't let money make her forget that. Samuel met his gaze. And what about me? David hesitated, then said, it's not too late to remember. He stepped into the drizzle, the faint glow of the porch light glinting off the rain. Samuel stood there long after the car's taillights disappeared. When he finally turned, Lily was watching him with a knowing smile. You see it now, don't you? He nodded slowly. I think I do. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the same documents he used to chase power, zoning deals, development bids, projects that had consumed him. But all he could see was David's calm expression. And then it hit him. All the influence in the world meant nothing if he couldn't look another man in the eye without a title in between. For the first time in decades, Samuel Hartman picked up his phone, not to call an associate, not to make a deal, but to make amends. Tomorrow, things were going to change. The next morning, the city sky was a pale wash of gold and gray. Samuel Hartman stood at his office window, a cup of untouched coffee cooling on the desk behind him. For the first time in years, the billionaire developer wasn't thinking about numbers or contracts. He was thinking about a janitor, a man who'd taught him more about worth in one dinner than he'd learned from a lifetime of wealth. He turned from the glass and picked up the phone. Linda, he said to his secretary, his tone firm but unfamiliar even to himself. Call the academy. I'm attending this morning's assembly. A pause on the line. Yes, sir. Will they be expecting you? No, he said. That's the point. By 10 a.m., the auditorium of Redwood Academy buzzed with the usual mix of chatter and routine. Rows of students slouched in chairs, teachers whispered at the back, and the janitor, David Cole, moved quietly along the side aisle, sweeping near the stage. His work was invisible, like always, until the doors at the rear opened, heads turned, whispers spread. Samuel Hartman, the school's wealthiest benefactor, walked in. His tailored suit looked almost out of place under the buzzing fluorescent lights. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't here for ceremony. The principal hurried over, flustered. Mr. Hartman. What a surprise. I'll take it from here, Samuel said, his tone polite but absolute. The microphone squealed slightly as he stepped up to the podium. "Good morning," he began, his voice calm, low, deliberate. The room stilled almost instantly. "I didn't plan to speak today, but last night I realized something worth saying couldn't wait another day." He looked over the rows of students, all eyes fixed on him, and then, deliberately, he looked toward David, still standing by the wall, broom in hand. "Some of you know me as the man whose name is on the new gymnasium or the scholarship fund. You see me as someone successful, important, maybe even untouchable." He paused. "But the truth is, I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear, not what I need to learn." The silence was deep, thick, curious. Samuel drew a slow breath. "Yesterday, a man saved my daughter's life. Not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was right. That man is standing in this room." All heads turned toward David. He froze, hands still on the broom handle, unsure what to do with the sudden weight of attention. Samuel continued. "When I met him, I saw what most people refuse to see. I saw a uniform, not a person, a title, not a life. And I was wrong." The words echoed through the hall, heavy with humility. "He didn't just save my daughter. He reminded me of something I'd forgotten long ago. Dignity isn't measured by wealth, but by character." The principal shifted nervously, but Samuel wasn't finished. "David Cole served this country before he ever swept a floor. He protected strangers before any of us knew his name. He's a veteran, a father, a man of integrity, and it's time this school and this city treated him as such." Applause started small, a few claps from the back, then spread like a wave. Students stood. Teachers nodded. Even the principal found herself joining in, hands trembling as she clapped. David stood still for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he slowly lowered the broom and gave a modest nod, eyes glistening. When the noise quieted, Samuel spoke again. "I came here to donate buildings and programs," he said, "but I realize now, the greatest investment we can make is in respect. From this day forward, this school will establish a scholarship in David Cole's name, for students who embody his values, humility, service, and strength." Gasps, then renewed applause, louder than before. Lily, seated near the front, wiped a tear from her cheek. Samuel turned toward David. "I owe you more than gratitude, Mr. Cole. I owe you an example. Thank you for reminding me of what true honor looks like." David finally found his voice. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "Just pass it forward." The audience fell silent again, not out of awkwardness, but reverence. In that moment, the billionaire and the janitor stood on equal ground. After the assembly, the crowd swarmed with chatter. Reporters from the local press were already outside. Word of the speech spread across social media before noon. "Billionaire publicly apologizes to janitor," the headlines read. But David didn't care for the noise. He returned to his duties, sweeping the same floors as before. But now, when people passed him, they met his eyes. They smiled. They said his name. Lily caught up to him later near the courtyard. "You changed something today," she said softly. He shook his head. "Your father did." She smiled. "Because you made him remember who he was." That evening, Samuel stood once again at his study window, only this time, he wasn't alone. His daughter stood beside him, her arm resting on his. "Dad," she said quietly, "you did the right thing." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. "No," he murmured. He did. Outside, the city lights glimmered, and somewhere beyond them, in a small apartment with peeling paint, David Cole sat by the window, sipping black coffee, his reflection faint in the glass, a man finally seen for who he'd always been. 2 weeks later, the early morning air carried a chill. The school courtyard was quiet, still glistening from a night of rain. David Cole pushed his mop bucket along the tiled corridor, the rhythmic squeak of the wheels echoing softly. He didn't mind mornings like this. The silence was peaceful. Honest. As he worked, he heard footsteps approaching. Slow, deliberate. He turned, expecting a teacher or student. It was Samuel Hartman. No entourage, no suit this time, just a simple gray sweater and jeans. In his hand was a folded envelope. "Morning," Samuel said. David nodded. "Morning, sir." Samuel hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You can drop the sir. After last week, I think we're well past that." David chuckled. "Fair enough." Samuel handed him the envelope. "I wanted to give you this in person. It's official. The David Cole Scholarship for Character and Service has been approved. First recipient will be announced next month." David looked at the envelope, but didn't take it right away. "You didn't have to name it after me." "I did," Samuel replied, "because you reminded me that the world needs more people who do the right thing quietly." David finally accepted it, fingers brushing the paper as if it were something fragile. "You've got a good daughter," he said softly. Samuel's expression softened. "She thinks the world of you." "We both do." For a long moment, the two men stood in the empty hallway, the billionaire and the janitor, the powerful and the humble, equals in a way few ever reach. Samuel extended his hand. "Friends?" David met his eyes, then clasped the hand firmly. "Always." A quiet smile passed between them. No cameras, no reporters, just understanding. As Samuel walked away, David glanced out the window. The sunrise broke through the clouds, light spilling across the wet pavement. He set the envelope on his cart and picked up the mop again. The same job, the same haul, but everything felt different now. Because this time, when people passed by, they didn't look past him. They looked up to him. If stories like this remind you that dignity has nothing to do with titles, uniforms, or class, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next story where quiet strength turns judgment into regret and respect finally finds its way home.